first question, something that I think is really interesting to hear from people is what was like your first aesthetic awakening, or like what was like the first time you realized, oh, I like, visual arts and design, if you can recall it.
Man, I love that term, aesthetic awakening. Um, I probably have had like a few in my life at different points. I mean, I grew up around print and stuff. My dad worked in printing like forever. So like when it'd be like my dad's week and stuff, when I was really little, some of my earliest memories are like playing in shredder bins and like print shops and like the big like dark room rotating the doors and like, like people have those smells that like bring back like memories like grandma's cooking or something like that. Mine is like ink chemicals on like a print floor when you go through the big flaps. Like I walk through there, I'm like, oh, 4-year-old me. Like those are like, it's really weird, but I never really like thought about design or anything like that. Like I always like to make stuff. I did art stuff, but I was never like a fine artist, traditional. And so I kind of never like thought about design stuff, but I always loved something like the work, like print posters and stuff that like I just had around the house that my dad had worked on like growing up, like that they had printed, not like designed. But I think like when I really started to notice stuff was probably when I started like skateboarding, like when I was like 11 or 12. So I was like 99, 2000. And so I like looking in skate magazines and then like decks and like things like that is like when I started to like be like, oh man, like this is cool. Like I like this, like this is neat, like this style. And then that kind of continued on. And I just like different things. And then I actually wasn't even, so when I graduated and started at like ARC, I was gonna be an international relations major with a Japanese minor. I had done an exchange to Japan the year prior in high school and like other stuff. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. And then I started taking politics classes like for international relations. I was like, I hate this. Like, this isn't what I like. And one of my friends who I was skating with at the time, who now works for me, went through the program, John, he was taking an illustrator class. And we had just like moved in together, or I ran into him or something. And I was like, all right, well, I'll take Illustrator and Photoshop. And I did, and I like instantly just like fell in love and realized like in Illustrator, like, oh shit, like this is how I could like make skate graphics, because there's like so many amazing skate artists over the years that like I just fell in love with their work. That I can't remember the artist right now, but he did like most of like the decks were chocolate, where they would like line all up and make beautiful sceneries and stuff. But yeah, so probably through skateboarding was like the first like real one where I started to notice like, I like that. I don't really know why. I can't put words to it. I don't really know Gestalt at that time, so I, can't piece it together. But definitely like skateboarding helped, like, and the magazines and layout and all that stuff was like really just something I loved.
So that natural progression from, obviously early on being art or design adjacent, and then kind of being influenced by skateboarding culture. I guess take us through schooling post international relations and like getting into the Sac State program, and about your time there.
Okay.
What you learned.
So from that point where I was just talking about to Sac State, it's probably about like a 7-year gap. I say I got like my passport stamped by all like Los Rios colleges pretty much. Like I had a little bit of time. I was a Beaver for a bit, and I like was a Panther for a bit, right? And I kind of hopped around, taking classes here and there. I was doing design. Around that time, I was doing a bunch of music stuff too. I ended up DJing for Red Bull for a while and had like monthlies downtown and doing music. And then I did like telecommunications for a bit. So like tower climbing. So, like those giant towers, like running cable up them and like building power plants on mountains and shit. And like designing like in between, like all this time, like going home and like making like posters and like other stuff. And then had a silk screen press. So I was like learned to silk screen and was like making shirts and like other things. And then at one point, I think I was like 23. And so I'd been like kind of doing design art since I was like 18, 19 at that time. I was like, I just go back and finish this. So then I made the conscious decision to actually do good in school, and not just like get W's in classes and like only take the ones I want. I always like did great in my design class. It was just, like the histories and the maths and all those ones that like it wasn't the best. And so I just buckled down, and like as soon as I decided like I want to do this, I want to transfer to Sac State because I want to mentor under Gwen and like these other things, like it just kind of clicked. And so I did that. But yeah, freelancing like the whole time, like I was getting paid to do design work at this point. I took over like right when I started at Sac State, I was doing like a lot of the stuff for TBD Fest. Jason Malberg was the creative director who did all that, and he left for Greece like the month or before like TBD started. And so Hargis and them were like, Curtis, can you like take over? I'm like, sure. And so I handled like all the stuff like the month before leading up, all the artist assets and stuff while I was at Sac State. And so I had transferred to Sac State. Man, there's a bunch of stuff in between too. Probably in 2000, say I graduated in 2017 or 18. So like probably like 2015, 16 is when I got to Sac State. And then pre-design and got into the program, thank God. Man, we had like over 100 people submit or something like that. So like, it was intense. Like you really didn't know. You're like, man, I hope. And Gwen was still there. So like we had to do like everything was craft. So we had 2 like books we had to submit. So we had like the book where it's point line plane, and like all of our squares and everything we had to like cut and then mount in the book. And like people were saying, like had gone through the program, like, oh yeah, if there's like pencil marks, like you're out. Like there's like no tick marks, no nothing. And so it was just like this like crazy thing. And then all our color theory things, like we had to cut the squares and match, and it had to be exactly like they were grading on like craft and crazy stuff. So like you seriously have like the most anxiety like holding these books, like dropping them off that day. And like so got in and did the program, and yeah, it was amazing. So
I mean, this kind of deviates from the list that I have, but I think it's kind of interesting to ask.
shoot away.
How did that experience of like being really
Wait, did I
scrutinized?
freeze or did you freeze?
Did I screw?
Uh-oh, am I frozen?
Wait, guys, who can hear
Hold
who?
on.
We can hear both of you guys, but Curtis froze for a second.
Oh wait, now we're good. Everyone froze. Now we're back. Sorry.
Okay, it might be me
Okay.
too. What was that experience of being, scrutinized and heavily focused on craft? How did that influence, or how do you think that influences you now in terms of your design workflow? I can rephrase that if it doesn't make sense.
No, that makes total sense. Well, I think all of us that subject ourselves to being designers and going through this program have at least something slightly innately wrong with us. Like you're a masochist for like critique and obsessiveness, right? Like you don't go through this program, you don't go to this, like you know what you're getting into. You've seen Spring Show, you've talked to people, right? Like you go to this program because like you're trying to get the licks in, like it's training, right? So I loved it. Like all the stress, all the like the non-sleeping and like that stuff, like it's just one of those things. It's kind of like it's like the wax on Karate Kid stuff. Like you're like, oh man, I'm just cutting squares, I'm cutting squares, and then like you go to like make something and you're like, oh, like that's why, and it's not just about like the craft. And I think a lot of people miss this element when they were doing it because they just like are too close-minded in the sense of like what we're doing now and not thinking the macro. It's like just the attention to detail is like on such a finite level that like when you go approach anything else, you're going to just naturally have that eye to catch things and like see what's off. Like it's almost like annoying at the point, like the more you do it and the better you get, like you can just see stuff instantly, like that's like out of place or slightly off. And like that's what you're really doing, is it's just like training you to like think about what you're doing. Think about the cut. Like, is it straight? Have I aligned these? Have I calculated these other things when I'm thinking about this cut? And that's like plays into other design, right? Like I'm doing this design thing. Am I thinking about every single piece I need to be thinking about to do this? Right. So it's more like a philosophical, like for the cutting. And like, I think those of us who were able to like embrace it and see past the like monotony of just like, this is dumb. Why am I doing this? This isn't design. Like, I'm never going to cut. It's like, yeah, dude, like we're not working on light tables with Ruby lith and doing like paste up anymore in design. Like no one's expecting like you to graduate and go like with your X-Acto to an interview, be like, what do you want me to cut? I'll cut that. Like I could cut a straight edge, right? It's not, that's like not the thing. It's a bigger philosophy of like attention to what you're doing and like thoughtfulness, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Gwen was very much like that when I was fortunate to be like the last group that had her for something, and you either loved her or you hated her, and she either got along with you or she didn't. But it was really, and it had nothing to do with like your skill or who you were. It was like your willingness to like kind of like embrace the process and like do what she's saying and like follow through. And like if you did that, at the end of it you had like an awakening, and that you're like, oh my God, like I look at things differently now. And I'll still like, I'll never be like Gwen's brain is on a different fucking level. Like I save her notes and I can't decipher them. They're like code, and I'm just like, oh my God, one day I'll learn this. But
talk us through, I guess, I mean, obviously you kind of had more of a design background heading into Sac State, but tell us about, I guess, like the graduation portion and that next chapter post grad. And I mean, I think a lot of us, aside from the pandemic, feel a little bit of insecurity about the act of graduating and moving past education. So yeah, just tell us about your experience and what you took away from that, and any advice for our graduating seniors.
yeah, for sure. I have something very much to speak to this because let's see, I think it's two-part. I'm gonna swap how I talk about this. So graduating into what you guys are right now, and like with the pandemic and all this uncertainty and stuff, like there's a few things there. So like I said, I mean, if you're doing the math on when I said I was 11 and 12 and 2009, I graduated high school in 2006. And if I had gone straight through to a 4-year college, I would have been graduating right into like the recession, right? And a lot of my friends did, and they have now, you know, and a lot of them fell into like this like lost workforce, right? Where, you know, the recession hit, no one got hired out of college, years went by, economy came back, but they didn't go back and retroactively hire right? It was like, they didn't go like, oh, well, we stopped here. They just like skipped. So you have all these people who are kind of like caught in this like in between and stuff. Myself during that time, and my two partners, Sean and Damien, like we've been doing stuff together for back in that time. The greatest thing that like came from that for us was no expectation. So normally, right, like you know, it's like the promise of like go to college and like get a degree, and then you'll make X amount, and then you'll be able to buy a house, and then you could have a nuclear family and do all these things. Well, we saw that just get totally obliterated and shown that it's like a bold-faced lie in 2009. Like all of us, like that's why when people talk about like my age group and stuff and the millennials being like, oh, they're just like so anti, it's like because we saw everything that we were told was like a thing be not a thing. Pensions got disappeared overnight. Like people lost their like 30 years of work. Like all this was bullshit, right? So at that time, like it's kind of, you got into this mode of like, well, there's no expectation, right? Like I can do whatever, and I'm going to do what I think is like the best for like my path, right? And opposed to preconceived notions and pressure from family or outside things to push you in a specific direction. That's kind of gone. Like in times that like things are really good, and economy's good, there's so much red tape to like get into anything, like to throw an event, to like do stuff. I mean, we were throwing warehouse parties and like no one gave a shit because like there's recession had hit, like there was no money in anything. Like when times are good, it's harder to get into stuff and do stuff and start your own business or do it. The best time to do that is in times like now where everyone has just written off everything, right? Because as soon as expectations are gone, like that's like free. Like do whatever you want. Like if you want to spend this time like getting into like rolling candles and like selling like online incense and stuff like that and designing like stuff for that, do it. Like, you know, so I think in the traditional sense of like, I have to graduate and then go get this like job somewhere, right? Like the next step in your life, it's going to be different paths. And so I think like one thing to embrace in this time is the uncertainty, is the unknown. And if you can kind of like make peace with that and going forward and spend this time being like, okay, I did this program, I have these skill sets, I'm good at what I do. Like, what do I want to do? Like, what are the things that like I'm passionate about, right? And I constantly preach passion over everything, like whatever that means. So really just like spending this time and getting ready to graduate and know you're going into the unknown, but that doesn't mean you're going into like emptiness and like despair and like you're not ever going to find anything. You like, I'm sure there's like a varying age in this room, but I went back to school and graduated when I was 28. And I know friends of mine that graduate, they were even older. And then like, you know, most of everyone's younger. So if you're in that like younger category where you're like 21, 23, 24, 20, I mean, I know it seems like, oh my God, I have to have this figured out right now. It's a big deal. You have so much time. Like you have so much time to like figure out and do this. And I think everyone in design expects like, well, I got to get a design one position, then I got design two and senior design and art director and like creative director. Don't worry about that shit. Like spend this time like honing craft, and it doesn't matter what it is. Like the best route to like success is just time. Like there's no way to circumvent. Like some people have an innate ability and talent, but the reality is that it just takes time and patience and like put in the time. If you spend the time now to figure out like what you want to do, you're going to be like so much further ahead, because most people graduate and they get a job that they hate. And then they spend like 5-10 years at an agency that doesn't fucking do anything for them, but suck them for like ideas and stuff. So don't think that like getting that job that like might have that income, and everyone's like at a different spot. So like, obviously I'm not saying like sell all your possessions and like you'll just be fine. Like everyone's got different roles and responsibilities and like things that they have to take care of in life. So like to the extent where you're not like putting yourself in like a position, but just keep that in the back of the mind. Even if you have, you know, family to take care of, kids to take care of, like any of that stuff, you still should be thinking about like long-term passion. Like what do you want to like get out of your design career? Because it's a long career. And if you think like your 20s and your 30s and like that's it, like I am constantly excited about like, I mean, Milton Glaser was like 88 going to his studio still. Like I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what shit I'm turning out at like 90 or like 70. Like what I've been able to do in like my design, like every few years I look back, I'm like, oh man, like I've learned so much, right? Like I'm like excited for like 50 years from now on that. And so like when you look at your career like that, it's a little bit more like, oh, like I have a lifelong career and passion I'm a part of. I don't have a career where I'm swinging a hammer and breaking down my body, that I got 20 good years of like being in top shape before I'm like irrelevant. Like your brain can keep growing. Like IP is forever. And Gwen told me one of the things that stuck with me forever is like, she's like, people aren't gonna like, you're not gonna make money. People are gonna pay you for your designs. You're gonna make money and be successful because of your ideas. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. Like, because if you're in the rat race of like, I gotta be the best at Photoshop or this new technique or whatever, these are all tools. Like IP is king. The ideas, that's why I never stress out about like, oh, well, now in Photoshop, they can swap out backgrounds like faster. Fuck, I'm glad, because I hate doing that. Like I can't wait. Like the more tools that come out like that make that shit easier, like, oh my God, bring them, because that getting this out faster is like what the real thing is. And if you get caught up on like one thing, like that's not the long term. It's all about the ideas and IP, and everyone in this room like is able to just come up with the next one. So that's what you should be focusing on, and like figuring out what you want to do, like what you, I'll point to everyone in here, want to do, not what someone else wants you to do, or like what you think like the next step is. Like, what do you want to do next? And like do that. If it's not in design, you want to go pursue like music, or like go pursue sewing, or go pursue like bioengineering, fucking do that. Like, don't like feel trapped because like you're here now. Like, this is such a moment in time, and you guys have so much more time like going forward. So don't get like caught up on that aspect. And like I said, I lived through like some shit where everyone was like, the world ended and like there's no more money and we're all gonna die in like 2009, and like we came back, and then we were like, we're all gonna die and there's something else. So like it's gonna just keep doing that. It's the world. Like, we're gonna come back, and next thing there's gonna be a volcano or some shit that pops up in the States, or I don't know. But like it's always gonna be ebb and flow with like good times and bad times, good times and bad times, right? So in the downtime, that's the time to like double down and do shit, because there's way less red tape. Everyone thinks like, oh, I'm gonna get my idea going when it's like good. Nope, that's the worst time. No one's gonna give you money. It's gonna be red tape. Like, figure out your shit like when it's bad, and you're so much better off. So that was the second part of the question, in my pep talk to all of you, that you're all gonna be fine and you're wonderful. My experience leaving was I got recruited by a former student, because I kind of work in both sides of my brain. Love design, but I'm also like love tech and analytical and like coding and all that stuff. And so I got recruited to go work in like this like subcommittee at this tech company, where it was like I was kind of like working on secret projects. But my main goal there my main thing ended up being, I would work with the design team to teach them that, to understand like, you got to make stuff that the engineers can make, and like, here's how we should think. Like, this is great, this is beautiful, click this thing, it does this. Okay, is that gonna break the app? Like, is that really functional? Because like, that's gonna call the server like 15 times, and like, is this one thing really like manageable? And then I had to talk with the engineers a lot and be like, guys, it does matter keeping the size right on the type. Like, it, the padding, like these things do matter. It's not just like, we'll just round it, and like kind of build the bridge, and speaking both languages, and like building the teams together, which was great. And it was good practice for like the future of working and hiring people, and like making people work together to their strengths. I also saw a lot of terrible bad things run in the company, and like how I would never run a company. They swapped out like 5 leadership positions while I was there. It was a $1 billion company, and it was run terribly. And ultimately, like, they were clearing people out and all sorts of stuff. And so I exited there, and pretty much was like, well, never gonna do that again. And then partnered with my long-term friends and my current partners now to, work on some things, which ended up leading to the creation of YBG. So that was kind of my my exit. But at this point, like I said, I graduated, I was 28, 29. So I'd already spent 10 years downtown, like making connections, like working and doing stuff. So like the natural transition for me was already to kind of do that. Like, we had the connections, we had like the work portfolio to do it. I was being like asked by the other agencies like to come consult and like talk about things, and like, oh cool, like, wow, you do more than we pay our junior designers or designer ones to do. I'm like, so why would I come work in that position for you? So it's kind of one of those things, like, you just got to know who you are, and like know like where you stand and stuff, and like make that call and place your bets when it makes sense. And that's what we did.
It seems like
That was a lot.
No, that was really great. It seems like that position you took out of college like really helped you communicate design in like different ways, which I feel like is like a perfect segue into Yellow Brick Group and talking about the creation of that. Like, how did that experience influence the way that you operated at Yellow Brick Group, especially early on when you're trying to convince clients that like, hey, we're new, but like give us a chance, like what did that experience and the tools that you picked up and like negotiating with, the techie people versus the designers, like how did that help with clients, I guess?
Yeah. Well, kind of the antithesis of us starting it is my partner and I, Sean, have been doing stuff downtown and like in Sacramento and have had a passion and a love for where we grew up here for so long. And we would see new things popping up in our city, new areas with abbreviated names where arenas are and stuff that were like, the F is this? Like, this doesn't represent, like, who named this? Like, why is the branding this? Like, and we kind of sit and talk, but we're also like very self-aware and self-reflective people. And we kind of said, wait, we don't have a horse in the race. So like we can sit here and like talk shit about like some stuff that gets done, but like no one's gonna come tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, you guys at the coffee shop, you got a better idea? You want to like take this contract? Like, so we were kind of like, well, like if we don't have any horse in the race, like to even be found to ask to be doing any of this stuff, like then we're just complaining. Like we're not doing anything. We're not actually like being a part of a change. We're just complaining. That's the easiest thing to do. The easiest thing to do is complain, right? So we kind of like, unfortunately our third partner, Damien, was really excited about this. And we kind of just started it to like do stuff that we wanted to do. And not all of us had worked in positions where like decisions were made above us that we wouldn't have like done. And we're like, well, shit, if we have our own thing, we can do stuff like our own way, right? So that's what we did. The best advice I can give you guys is because you're asking about like negotiating deals and stuff. If you start something with people that like fill the gaps of like what you don't have. Like I see too many people like, oh, like I'm gonna start this thing with like my friends that do exactly what I do. That's great, but just know if like you're designers and you start a company, at some point, like say there's 3 of you, 2 of you aren't going to be designing anymore because there's so much other stuff to handle in like business. So Damien, fortunately, loves numbers and spreadsheets and logistics. So that's why he handles like payroll and logistics and contracts and all this stuff that like, God, I'm so happy I don't have to handle. And then Sean is like a salesperson. Like he's just one of those people. He's like, when you talk to him, he's like, he just can sell you on like, and he's like, big idea, right? And like it's this much, like this is how much it is. Like, and I'm like I'm like execution. Like I love like putting the puzzle together on how to like actually do it and then like actually make the things and create. But I'm the worst at like getting like paid for stuff because I'll sit down with someone, they're like, yeah, I got this thing. And if I'm excited about it, I'm like, oh fuck yeah, you can do this and like, have you thought about doing this way? Actually, hold on, let me just spin this up for you real quick. Here's this thing. And like people are like, stop, like you get money to do that. So, and same thing with design stuff, when like you pitch a contract and you're like, oh yeah, like this much, and then it's like, oh yeah, sure, but John's like, nah man, this much. I'm like, dude, like they're not gonna pay this. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, they're going to pay that. That's why I don't like negotiate like how much things are. So you find the people that fill the gaps, that you don't have, and you like surround yourself with people that are better than you at things. Best advice, get rid of your ego now at a young age, and like life will be so much easier. Because you surround yourself with people that are better than you. Even on my design team, like I'm constantly looking for people that are better than me at design stuff. Like I akin it to saying, and it's going to show my nerdness, but I talk about it's like building like my best D&D party. Like I don't want a whole crew of tanks or wizards or archers. Like you die like going into anything. So I need a wizard and a paladin and like a tank here, and like like you build out like a party of people that like support what you're doing and are better than you, and then you're gonna like learn and you're gonna be able to uplift there. So that's kind of like with starting YBG and like how we got the client stuff is, I mean, this is hilarious, but the work you're doing in the program, if you treat your work, or if you treated your work, I don't know if it's how many seniors or juniors or pre-designers are here, but if you are a senior, just know that all your work you do in your portfolio, right, is concepts or conceptual work or concepts. So you don't have to say this is a school project. You can say this was a design concept for a bakery or whatever you're doing. Like, no one's gonna go back and be like, wait a second, that was a school project. It's like, fuck, if you couldn't tell, then why does it matter, right? Like, I think people get caught up on like giving too much information up. Like, I had shit in my portfolio when we first started that was like school projects because it looked so good, and like I could speak to it like it was a full thing, and we just be like, oh yeah, this was a concept, proof of concept. Because it was. All your projects are proofs of concepts, right? Like, it's not a lie. You're just doing it in the confines of school. So when you graduate, like, and you're trying to put together ideas or pitch something, you did the work. It's not like you didn't do the work. So don't feel like you can't show like those projects and just, rebrand them as proof of concepts, because it's good. It's better work than a lot of like paid designers are doing out there. So don't feel like you hide behind that. Juniors, if you're in this room, or like pre-designers going to be juniors, treat all your projects that you're doing in this program like they are jobs, and don't treat them like they're projects, because then you will leave with a portfolio of jobs that you can resume into other jobs. So it's like, even if you don't see like, you're like, oh fuck this project, blah blah, like, cool, turn it into something that's interesting. Like, find like the joy or the creative like inspo for it, and be like, okay, wait, if I were to show this and get money for it, how would I approach this project, right? That's how you should look at it, because ultimately you're leaving with a portfolio that can get you money and paid to make more design work, right? It's like the old meme of Exhibit, like, yo dog, I heard you like this, so I put this on this, like, yo dog, I heard you like to get paid for design, so I made some designs and got paid for my designs. Yeah, it's that. Like, so treat all your projects like they are real project that you're getting paid for, that you want to show someone in your portfolio to get paid for more projects, and you're going to leave like with a whole, like, way ahead of like every other design student that comes out. So yeah,
I think that's super helpful. I think the mindset that you have around design and like the way you think, especially in school, like the way you think about something can definitely change your attitude towards it. I feel like everyone can attest to like enjoying certain projects more than others because they saw themselves in it more. So they saw themselves in that
Yep.
project. But I kind of wanted to go back into that business side of things, and kind of tools that you feel like you felt were helpful in terms of being successful with business. Katie asked to put up a question about time management and budgeting your time, but I'd like to kind of keep it more widespread of just beyond time management. What are some skills and some lessons you've learned through starting your own business that you feel like can apply not necessarily to just to someone that wants to start their own business, but somebody that wants to freelance or work for a design firm? So you could take that and run with it however you want. It seems like.
Totally. Well, man, time management, dude, I can do an entire talk on like that. And I have done them on time blocking and stuff. I've been an avid like bullet journaler for like 7 years. I mean, having ADHD, that's the only way that I can like get through my day, is like putting everything out and like tracking it. And then at the end of the day, like, did I do it? And like going forward, like, you have to do that. Like, and that's my process, right? I think the thing is, like, everyone here needs to find like their process on how they can track and like hold themselves accountable to things, and not feel like it's a one size shoe fits all, because then you're just going to be like chasing someone else's process, right? Time blocking is another thing. It's a really good thing. It's an exercise that you can do. I don't know if anyone's familiar here, but essentially you have your working days calendar, right? And then you have your working hours of the day, because everyone's like, I have 24 hours. No, you don't. You don't have 24 hours. You're not active during those 24 hours. Pick like the hours like you are active from, and like if it's 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., there's your active day. If it's 4 a.m. to 8 p.m., if it, you know what I mean, whatever it is, like create like that hours, then go through like your week and everything you have to do, right? Like school, can't say like, oh, well, I'll just do it that time because you have class. Nope. If you have like kids you have to pick up or drop off, like block that time out. So block out everything that you like have to do on that day and schedule work. Like you can't say, oh, I'll just do it now. And it's like you have a job. Like you can't, I'm not coming in because I'm working on this thing. Block out everything you have to do. And what that will do is it'll reveal gaps of time that you didn't realize like you had. Like you're like, oh shit, I actually have like 2 hours on Wednesdays. I didn't realize like I have like, okay, what am I going to do in that time? And that's where you can like truly start to like schedule in. And that's how you can start to work on like, if you need additional time for projects, if you want to work on your passion project, like that's where you really start to like find, because a lot of people are just like, I'm so busy, I have stuff going on all the time, but they never actually write out their schedule to find out when they're not busy. And most people I work with that I help do this are like, wow, I didn't realize I had this much extra time. It's like, I know, because like it's so much easier to say like I'm busy. And then like tools just in general for business. Well, one thing for design is to be brutally honest with yourself about value and money and all these things. It's the hardest conversation to think of because you know you go through the program, you invest this time, like you're like people talk about how much you're gonna make and all this other stuff, but the reality is like unless you're going into like UI or UX or something like that, like you're not gonna make like $70,000 like out of graduating like as a graphic designer. Like it's just not like, I mean, it depends regionally where you're at, but like you can look and see like what the median incomes are for stuff, right? And you know, graphic design, like granted, yeah, it's like we do a lot of stuff. Like if you're a graphic designer at an agency, like salary is not like a Bay Area salary, right? So like I said, unless you're going into like a high yielding like field, like just be realistic on like how much like you're gonna make. And then same thing with like freelancing, right? You gotta look at it from both sides of the table. Like the person who's like paying you is looking about like the ROI that like they're investing into the work you're doing, and you're looking at it for like how much worth you think you're bringing to the table, right? And the faster that you can look at like the perspective from the other side of the table and figure out not to just like hunker down and like be on like grumpy design forums and complaining about like we don't get paid enough. It's like, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing to increase the ROI? Because I don't give a shit how good of a designer you are. Like if you're creating a logo for like a sandwich shop or like something that's like visual aesthetics are not going to increase the bottom dollar for like the company, then that's not a good return on it. Like you're not going to get paid 50 grand to do a sandwich logo, or you know what I mean? Like it's not, it's like it, you got to look at the scale of what it is. Now, if you came to them and you said, hey, I want to do like, you know, we're going to negotiate an identity. Yeah, a logo will be a piece of that, but like how much do you sell each month, right? Like, do you have a rewards program? Do you do this? Do you have something like a takeaway that people are incentivized to come back and keep buying? How much more do you think you would make if people came back in each day, right? I can design you something, right? And you bring like going back the IP, the ideas, and you design that. That's how you're gonna like convince someone to pay you that more money, right? Like as we've moved up in design, like yeah, I've scaled the team. We have more capabilities on design and stuff like that. But really the reason we've started to like be able to charge more and do stuff is because the IP we offer. Like on an identity at this point, it's like more so strategy. Like it's almost like I could take out design out of like most of our identities we do now and offer consulting as like the main fee, and people would pay like how much I was charging 3 years ago for like the whole brand identity. Because like we've just gotten better at learning on how to find people's pain points in their business and fixing them. And because of that, like one thing that I say all the time in business is like, I don't want a portfolio of headstones. Like I don't want to like work on shit that then fails. And then like, because whatever, I took the job and I designed it, but then like it was a bad business model. And it's like, Oh, cool. Like, what have you done? Oh, like, you know that thing? Yeah, it's shut down. You know that thing? Ah, it doesn't exist. Like, no one wants that. So, like if you're not bringing something that like legitimately like offers a good ROI and increased value, like you're just like another person trying to like, peddle aesthetic, right? And like that, as much as we like to believe that like, kerning and all this other stuff and fixing the lighting on a menu and stuff is like, oh, it's God's work. Like it is to us. Like I obsess with these things too, but like in a business sense, no one gives a shit. Like that's the reality of it. And I think the problem is most people don't want to like actually have that conversation in design, especially when you're like in your design echo chamber with other designers and stuff. No one's like speaking like the business side of it on how the business owner is looking at it. And it's not like clients are evil or your enemy or you should be in fights with them. Like, first of all, you love your clients, even the ones that like can be tricky. Now, if they're like just toxic, fire them. Like that's, and if you keep them around and like you keep working for them, it's just like being in a bad relationship. Like that's on you. You gotta get rid of that. So like I've fired multiple clients, and like the first one's like, ah man, this is gonna be okay. And I'm like, oh my God, so much, my life's so much better. Why didn't I do this sooner? But just know like it's draining. All efforts equal, right? So like the time you're putting it there. But other clients and like needing stuff from you and like not understanding and you having to explain it, that's why you exist. Like if they had the answers or if they could speak the language or they could tell you exactly what they want and draw it like and hand it to you to draw it back and give to them, they wouldn't be hiring you. So our job as visual solutionists, right, like is to like offer solutions to problems. And the more you can diversify how you look at stuff and look at different perspective of like business angles and stuff for the client and solve them for them, like solve the problems they didn't know they had, I mean, you'll never be out of work, and people will learn that and come to you for it. But if you just like keep going on and being like, yeah, I'm gonna just design logos for people, I'm gonna, they're gonna pay me more money eventually for your logos, like no, they're gonna pay you more money for like your thinking, your strategy, and like these other things that like go into like these larger pieces. And like that's how you get really dangerous as a designer, is like being smart and like understanding how stuff works.
I like the use of dangerous in a good connotation. That's a good one. Another question from Katie that kind of like segues perfectly with time management. Is this idea of like, well, first of all, we're talking about value and the value you can bring to a client or to an employer, in this idea of time. And I guess burnout can become a big thing when you feel like you constantly have to be giving value to a client or to a employer. And so how do you prevent it? And what are some tips of getting out of that state of burnout, I guess, when you're kind of constantly micromanaging your time?
Yeah, couple things there. One, burnout is usually like a mixture of a few things, right? And a lot of it, I'm going back like to just being brutally honest with yourself, is poor time management and like putting yourself in a bad scenario where like you're having to rush or you're not on top of things, you're behind, like because just not able to manage stuff. And so you're like feeling like you're constantly like under the gun and rushing, like that. Like if you're feeling that, right, like you're gonna have like the best thing to do is just like take a step back and be like, okay, hold on, am I doing, is it me, like am I doing this? Because like unless you take on every single job, right, and like you put yourself in that position, because that's the other thing, like if you're feeling burnt out because you're doing too much, well then you put yourself in that position, right? Like it's the same thing, like I get up every day and I don't go get mad at clients because like I'm no one asked me to start a design firm, no one asked me, like it's not, I mean, like this is my choice every day to go do this. So if you're feeling this way like with like too much, then you need to like step back and take like a macro look at like what you're handling and like what's important and what's not important, like what's actually filling the buckets of like growth, financial gain, and like like your design love bucket, right? And so, and if certain clients or things aren't, like, you need to cut that, because the reality is like I said, all effort is equal. There has been so many times where like we have been in a situation and we're like, shit, man, like we really kind of need this client, or else we're going to be like burning capital if we don't fill the slot, right? And like every time we've been hesitant and taken shit and like continued on, we've wasted time that we've learned. If we cut them and just like peace, bye, and spend that energy getting a new one, like it's so crazy. Like we look back and we're like, oh my god, we should have like made this decision faster, right? But it's scary. Like it's scary, like the unknown, the uncertainty of like, well, this is comfortable, right? Like this is comfortable, this is good, like I don't want to shake it. It's not going to get better. So if it's bad, like it's generally not going to get better. Like if you have a client that like doesn't see your value, isn't like participating, isn't doing stuff, like that's it's done. And those are the red flags you'll start to find sooner. Like we vet clients at this point, like we interview them essentially, like, are we going to take you on? Because if it's bad at the jump and like you're late to meetings and you're not responsive in emails and like you're just saying all the bad words, like the bad buzzwords about like design, like that, and we find out you don't have your shit together, no, there's no way we're taking you on, because it never gets better, it always gets worse, right? Like even like amazing clients, like sometimes you're like, oh man, like they're actually a little bit more work, but at least they're like good, right? Bad clients will only become worse clients. So vetting at the beginning and how to protect yourself from that is like good ass contracts, like good ass like parameters up front. And even if it's like not contracts, like freelancing and stuff, because that's like hard to do it, it's the expectations, right? Cutting out any ability for like them to have assumptions, like, oh well, I thought you were going to also do this, I thought that this was included, I thought this meant, like those are like assumptions make an ass out of you and me, is like the saying. So you need to like have those things like dialed up front, exactly what you're delivering, exactly the timeline on when you're going to get it, the dates that you're going to like do these things on, deliver, right? Your expectation on their response back to you in that time, because that's the worst, is like you send it over and then they don't respond for 3 weeks, and then they're like, oh cool, I respond, oh yeah, you said you'd have it next week. I was like, yeah, I said I'd have it next week if you hit us 3 weeks ago and we had the 4 weeks to right? Like no, the timeline like extends. And so we have that in our contracts. Like we have an MSA, a Schedule A, and a Schedule B. An MSA is what we send out essentially, like here's all the contractual obligations and stuff like that. This is all stuff that like you guys don't really have to worry about, but I'll just lay out.
No, we want it.
A's
This
and
is
B's.
exactly what we
Okay.
want to hear, actually. So this is perfect.
So an MSA is essentially like it's like a, what's it stand for? It's like a master scope of something. Like I said, Damien's world, but like it lays out like all the stuff. Like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. Here's the dates. You have X amount of days to respond when we send over. You have like X amount of time to do this, right? Like we are going to provide this. Like if you don't respond in this amount of time, your contract then goes into like a state where then you have to like pay again, you know what I mean? Because you're wasting time. Like all that, like the longer you're with this one client and like they're not participating, well, at some point it's a penalty, because and no fault. It's not like I'm mad at you. It's just like I have this on my plate. We are doing everything we're supposed to be doing it to get it forward, to get you to the end solution, regardless if you're ready for it or not. Because that's usually the reason why like people are slow on stuff. They're like, I need this tomorrow. We're doing this. We're launching. Like we're gonna do this whole thing. Sure you are. They literally like it. You start moving faster than they're ready for it, and they're like, oh, I'll just push off that. It's like, nope. You'll get this in the timetable that we agreed upon, and whether or not you're ready, like that's not on us. Like I'm not gonna like not take on new work or like fill up my thing or get to burnout because we have too much on our plate because you're not prepared, like because you didn't show up. If I showed up and I was at a meeting, I was like, not ready, they would flip out, right? So it's like you gotta remember it's like a two-way relationship on that thing, right? So as much as like they would freak out if you showed up and didn't have your shit together, like you have to like protect yourself from that, right? So but the easiest one you guys can do like freelancing is just like have very set clear expectations up front. I'm going to deliver you this, this, and this. Is that good for this amount in this timeline, right? Because if you provide those things, like if you can like provide like a timetable, like it's going to be a 12-week process, and in the 2 weeks like, we're going to meet and we're going to have this review, and then another 2 weeks we're going to meet and have this, right? If you can like timetable it out, like that is so much better, because then they feel like, oh cool, stuff's happening, I'm seeing stuff. You're not going to have, the worst thing you can do is like, yeah, I'll do this job, yeah, oh yeah, cool, like you'll get this, hey, yeah, I'll have it in a couple weeks. No, don't do that. Like really like break down everything you're going to deliver, and that way like if anything comes back and they're like, oh yeah, like I know you said you're going to do things for my social, but like I also kind of want like a couple logos for this other thing I'm doing, and you're like, oh, that's cool, because like I kind of need a couple other more dollars to do those. So scope is like huge with that, and it's okay, like and you guys just got to realize like in design, like it's not you're not being a dick, like you're not being like me, you know what I mean? It's not, you're not being a bad like designer by not being a pushover. You know, like the more and more I deal with people and deal with like designers at a higher level, like it's some of the nicest ones have like the craziest contracts, because they're like, no, dude, I just don't have time for this shit. Like I love working. Like we have clients that like we fucking love, and like they're amazing, and we've done amazing projects with them, and we still have to be like, no, you know, because they're like, oh, but like we just like it's just this, and we're like, ah, but you know it's not. So like that's all good. Here's the contract, right? And then like, oh, we're still figuring it out. Can we just do this in between? We're like, no, contract, but you know that when we sign it, we're gonna like crush it. So you just gotta like get to that point where you understand like your time is value, and like, you know, the more you do it, the more it just like you stack up the wins. So
That's epic. That was a very long-winded burnout answer, but I really like it. Kind of got pieced together with a
none of
bunch of
mine are
other
gonna be short.
questions. No, it was perfect because it like covered a bunch of other questions I had for you. I have two more questions, and I want to run through them quickly so that we can get an opportunity for anyone that has thought of some new
Yeah, for sure.
questions to ask them.
Wait, Alan, if they're my cues, you don't have to ask them.
No,
Okay.
these are just two last questions. They're not yours though. Don't worry. You're not gonna get them privately answered, so we might as well just get them all publicly answered for everyone.
Yeah,
right?
if you have,
share the
if you have
wealth.
more. Yeah.
I just mean like I sent them because you were like, no one sent questions.
Yeah,
so
no,
I gave you a couple.
I appreciate them. They're all really great questions. So last thing would be if you were to able to like speak to your older self, maybe, you know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, what would be the
My
one
younger self or my older self?
your younger self? Sorry, did I say older
Oh.
self?
I was like, whoa, I've never heard that. That's a doozy.
Younger
Sorry.
self. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give younger Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would definitely be like have more confidence and ability. I feel, I mean, I definitely like there was a time. I mean, you're like that was too many things trying to come out of my mouth at once. You are all going to like that little voice in the back of your head that like is the self-deprecating design shit that we all deal with, because that's the universal joke is like people who are good at stuff feel like they're not good at stuff, and people who aren't just feel like they're amazing. That voice like doesn't go away. What happens is like you just start stacking more wins in life. So when it does come up and you get that self-doubt, you're like, wait a second, I did all these things. Like I'm not terrible. Like I am kind of good at what I do, but like just kind of like having more like confidence in like myself and directions, and like not getting to the point of like letting other people like influence or dictate and like not speak out about things. You know, it's like one of those things where you feel like you're at a certain place because of like where you're at in your career or what you've done, like, or what you haven't done. You think like, oh, I can't like I shouldn't be in this room. And the reality is like the more rooms I'm in, I'm realizing like, holy shit, like these people do not have their shit together. Like these people are running multi-million dollar companies, and like I run a better time management thing with my design team of like 4. So like you realize like the facade of like bigger has it more together, and once you get like is not there. So like the self-doubt and like thinking you shouldn't be somewhere, and like the imposter syndrome, like getting over that, like I would like that's what I would tell my younger self. Like, you know, just don't worry about that. Like, you know, you're supposed to be here, like you're good, you know, and it's played out that way. And like now, fortunately, like I have like enough say now, and things that have stacked up where I'm like, yeah, like I mean I still get it. Like there's things we're working on right now where like they start, I'm like, holy shit, like am I gonna be able to do this? And then I see the people that are working on the other side, I'm like, oh, we're more ahead of it than you, like we're good. Okay. So yeah, just like the confidence and like imposter syndrome and like getting over that, and just like knowing like what you're able to do, and like, you know, the contributions you can give. So
And then last one for me, your most controversial design hot take, whatever you could think of. Whether that
my
be
most controversial design hot take, like that
Yeah.
I've done.
No, like just like
Oh,
I don't know, like I actually like Comic Sans.
I just put a meme on a billboard. I just put a meme on a billboard on J Street, so that's pretty interesting. On J and 20, if you want to see, I was like, I pushed this idea for Alien Labs, and I wanted to do the always has been meme of the astronauts with the gun, and we did, and it's on the billboard, and I'm like, holy shit, like that's up. So
Is there any IP issue with that, since it is like somebody did create that?
no, I mean that's the thing, is like when it becomes like public domain, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like a thing. Also too, like I flipped it, like it's like different and bitmapped, and like the design's different, and like the saying and stuff like that. But yeah, when things like become like common, that it's whatever. Like also too, we're not like we're paying to have it up. It's not like I'm making money from that thing. So yeah, so the creative licensing is like gray area with memes.
Wishy-washy. Yeah.
Wishy-washy. Design hot take controversy. Like, I mean, I constantly rant about Google and their redesign to their icons. I fucking hate, because like they took like shit that like actually means something and then made polygon shapes that don't represent anything. So I hate that. I'm like, and people are like, oh, I try like, okay, real quick. I try not to like go in on design, because like you never know. Like that's the thing. It's like really easy to look at something like, oh, that sucks. Well, it's like, yeah, but like we've all been a part of like stuff we've worked on. We're like, man, these parameters are like, I had a beautiful thing and then I gave it to this person, and by the time what happened with it is like, ugh, that's not really like what I thought, right? So you never know. Like it's not like someone maybe started there, and like especially with larger companies, I've been on bigger projects where it's like designed by committee and stuff. You never know like what really goes into that. So it could have started in a good place. But this one just has my mind blown, because I feel like you have you have great design teams and like user feedback and stuff, and you decided to take all these things but then not do all of them, just do some of them. So you leave some of them not in the system that you've created. Yeah. So that's my big like controversial like angry thing, is Google's redesign of the icons and simplifying it.
That's a good hot take. I get confused and I'll accidentally hit like Gmail instead of like Google Drive or whatever.
So frustrating. Like
Super.
why did you need to change that? I like the mail. Like I like the envelope. It was cute. Like why you gotta make it a rectangle geometric shape thing? Like, oh, no reason for it. No one asked for that.
All right, we'll open it up to any questions from the rest of the crowd. I don't know what the best way to do it is, but I guess we'll just do it whoever speaks first, because there's only 20 of you. what are the odds that everyone's going to want to ask a question at once? Go ahead, anyone. And if you don't, it's fine. We'll end it here. But
I guess how
Yeah, it
large?
doesn't have to be about design either. You could whatever. Sorry, sir. Go ahead.
Just how you keep saying 4 designers, but you guys are pretty. How big is the actual company?
We have 11 of us, including all leadership. So there's me, my 2 partners. We have 3 people in our media department. So we have 2 like videographers and filmers. Well, technically 3, but Will Good Thompson, he really does like a lot of the social management stuff for us. And then I have, and then we have the glue to everything, my wonderful, beautiful Rose, who keeps everything in organization for me. I'm our project manager. So she is amazing. And then I have my design team, which is Robbie, John, Matt, and Block, which all of them are from the program. Because I'm biased and I like people from the design program. No, it really like how it really was started with who wants to like work in a closet for like very little pay and hopefully maybe build something one day. That was a sales pitch. We've literally just kind of grown by like just organic, natural. Like we've never put out like a hiring call. Honestly, like we weren't even hiring when Block got hired. He just was like gonna find me and kill me if I didn't hire him. I think like he like kicked my door down damn near, brought me, he kept bringing me things and cover letters and stuff, and was like, I'm gonna move. I will move out of Sacramento if I don't work here. Like, oh, shit. So but I love him. I'm so happy. He's the best. So yeah, not just design, but like we do a lot of design stuff. I mean, we do a lot of other stuff too. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's hard to lock it down. Like, I mean, the ethos of what we're doing is like, it's kind of really just like whatever we want to do. People thought we were insane for doing the night market like month 4 into starting a company with no capital or no runway. But we were like, I don't know, like we feel there's a void and we have a lot of friends who are chefs and it's hard to like go from chef to a brick and mortar, and we have friends who own restaurants and we're watching them get shit on trying to like get new information out there. And so like, what if there was just like a place that like you could gather, and like we travel a bunch and there's markets all over the world and stuff, and we're like, well, there's just a place where you could come learn about local shit. And so that's what we started with, and it grew very fast, and it was really cool. One of our case studies from, well, like success stories is Nash and Proper launched at our first night market, and they didn't even have like a truck or anything. It was like a trailer that they borrowed from a friend, and we're doing hot chicken sandwiches out of there, and they have gone on to like be Nash and Proper. So it worked. Like, I mean, we have a bunch of people that like found success and been able to do stuff with it, and which that's ultimately like what we wanted for it. And, you know, so for everyone who said like, this is a terrible idea and like, why would you do an event, like all these things? Well, we wanted to, and that's why we own the company. So we can make those calls and not have someone like shut down an idea that ended up being like the third one we did had 50,000 people, and it's the largest on the grid event. We like surpassed Concert in the Park, I think. You know, that would have been an idea that would have been shut down by like higher ups, because like, oh, where's the fiscal return on that? It's like, well, cultural return. So same thing with our dropping pins, like and mail service. But dropping pins is something we started during the pandemic, where we're like, we're just gonna make enamel pins and drop them off at businesses we like are friends with and that we work with, and they can just say like, first 25 people to buy something, like get this free pin, and hopefully like bring some people in the door. And now it's turned into like a series, and we've like collaborated with Sac Food and Booze to do it. And the one we're about to launch, we put in the order, but the next one we're doing is all female owned businesses, female owned, and then like a lot of minority owned ones, and like just to like shine light and be like, yo, look at all these cool places, like go support them, get a pin for free. And it's going to be this like beautiful little rose with like the saying on there, because, and Rose got to like organize that project. That was something that she was super passionate about, and we're like, yo, you tell us, what are the businesses that like you think like I don't know, like I know the ones, but like whatever you want to go find. So, and then mail service is the same thing, right? Like we don't make any money off mail service, but we feel like it's a lot of fun to like send stuff out to people and have like good messages and like, you know, we get to just like connect, and it's kind of like a give, right? Like we super blessed to have such a strong support here in Sacramento and like outside, you know, and our whole goal was like to create something that transcended like Sacramento and like, you know, put people on the map, because I've just watched so many people over the years dip because they're like, oh, there's no opportunity here. And it's like, we're losing so many amazing creative people because they think they can't have success in Sacramento. So like, let's change the narrative. Like people don't have to leave. Like I've gone toes now. Like I am doing stuff like in spaces in LA and other places where it's like, oh, well, like, you know, only people from down here could do this. It's like, oh, word? Like, cool. Well, not now. Like, it's just you, there's been such a closed mind for it. And it's just changing the narrative, right? Like, we have such an amazing, like, creative like economy here, and like the people and the makers and musicians, and like Sacramento has been slept on for way too long. Like so many people have gone other places and become successful that are from Sacramento. So it's not like they went, you know, they had that talent, they just needed the platform somewhere else to like get that boost. But you know, something in our water, I think it's the river.
Can you speak on that that giving to the community and interacting with the community and like it's almost, I mean, oh my goodness, there's the dog.
Sorry, at my feet. So
No worries. Because I feel like it that is kind of the idea of like I don't know, it's what goes around comes around, you know, like if you kind of give back to the community, it seems like the community gives back tenfold. So like in many ways it's like out of the kindness of your heart, but it can also be strategic, you know, in a sense that it opens up opportunities that may not have been available beforehand. So can you like talk about, I guess, like some of the opportunities that have come from things like that?
oh, so many, like from the night market, like so much stuff has come, and we use the night market as something we point back to of like when we talk to our clients about like why we go about stuff and why we take the time we do to do stuff and the decisions and like the way we do it. I mean, literally, like they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, well, night market, right? The thing that you hit us about up about that you heard of us or whatever. Like this is the exact formula we took to have that thing, right? We didn't have any outside interest. This wasn't put on by the city. The city actively like was a pain in the ass to even like have this happen. Like it's not like one of those things. So we can point back to that and say like, look, follow this formula, this will happen, right? Also, we've like made a ton of connections in other communities. Like we had a call with Broadway district. I won't go too much into it, but they have this identity that they were going to roll out, and they showed us, and we got to very politely tell them all the things that were wrong with it, and please do not roll that out right now because you will get canceled. So you know, so from the conversation though, like they were like, actually, can you guys come on and maybe like consult on how we can do this another way? And we're like, totally. Like, and that's, you know, what we want to be doing, right? We want to be like doing stuff where we can have a hand in the development and progress of our city, so we don't get things that like don't make sense because it's like, oh, well, this is great in Austin or this is awesome in Portland. It's like, we're not those places. Like that's great to strive for that, but like we have our own shit that's really cool, and we have people that can facilitate and make it. So like before we go out for ideas, like let's look inward first, right? And so for us, like community stuff is just like a no-brainer. You're totally right. Like I think too many people look at things like with serving the community and doing stuff like it has to like it can't be for something else. Like it's never going to be like purely altruistic, right? Like no matter what you see, and most of the stuff people are hiding behind that, like they're like, oh, I'm doing this thing, like it's purely good intentions for this, but then you look behind it, you're like, wait a second, all sorts of sketchy shit going on back here, right? instead of just coming out from the jump and being like, yeah, we're doing this thing, and like, you know, people are going to find out and then probably hire us for something, right? Like there's give and take for it, right? Like we know that by doing certain things like this, that's like our kind of like marketing spend, right? But instead of like putting that time and effort into like, I don't know, some traditional marketing or something, like we're going to put in that money into something that benefits something else, right? And like then it's like more of a full circle. Like it's not bad to do it, especially when you're being honest. Like people ask us about, and we're like, dude, full transparency, like here's everything. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, you don't be a weirdo. Like weirdo shit doesn't happen to you. Like that's the funniest thing. I watch like stuff happen to people. I'm like, well, if you just would have like 5 steps back there, like not been weird about what you're doing or like trying to hide it behind something, you would have been fine, you know? So like just knowing like, there's a really good book called Give and Take. I don't know if you guys have read it, but it really like is about that philosophy, right? Like just giving. And yes, you're gonna take some licks for doing that because there are people out there that are gonna take advantage of that. And you know, you're not gonna get everything back. But in the long term, one, you're gonna be able to sleep like a baby at night because you're not out there, you know, harming people or the world. And two, long term doing that, you are going to stack wins because people will start to notice. Like you do enough good stuff, you put yourself in these situations, like it will come back around. So, you know, I tell people, like designers all the time, that like if you're having trouble finding work or something to work on, go do an identity for your favorite nonprofit. They fucking need it. And like you can resume that. And honestly, you can write off its taxes. Like that's the benefit, right? There's, like I said, there's ways you can look at things where it's not just like you eat it all. Like you can do, if someone has a 501(c) and you donate and you say like this identity is like $5,000 worth of like work and time because I'm spending X amount of hours, however you break it up, or $2,500 or whatever it is, like you can write that off as your freelancing because that's donated time, right? And then, you know, you donate your time, like that's something towards like your business, right? But you also have now just helped this thing you care about have something they wouldn't have. Because you, I mean, like if you go around just thinking you're gonna be able to do stuff for free and like in life, you're not gonna have a career and like you're gonna have that burnout and stuff, right? So you need to figure out like how you can put yourself in positions to be successful and do good things like for other people. You know what I mean? Like it like you can pass that on. I think too many people like look at stuff and like, oh well, like I can't make money and be successful because like you look at people who have money and like they're jerks and they do terrible things to like society and the environment. It's like those are all choices that person made. It's not like they got, it's like not like the money like did it. Like you choose to like how you are as a person. So there's plenty of people who have been successful and decided to not be a shitty person and not be Jeff Bezos and like actually like contribute back like what they're doing and use their platform and their financial gain to do even better in the community, right? Because like let's be real, like that's without like capital, like there's not a lot you can do, right? Like there's red tape, there's all sorts of stuff. So the more successful like you become or aligned with people and have influence, like real influence, not like Instagram influence, and like you can make stuff happen, like that's good because keep being a good person, grow, get in better positions, and then you can make bigger, more like effective change in communities and stuff. Otherwise, you're going to just end up being a martyr, right? Where it's like, oh, I didn't make any money and I tried to do all these good things, but like I couldn't do it because this, yeah, that sucks. But like, take the opposite approach, like go hard, get super successful, and then give back like even more, you know? So.
Any other questions, guys?
Water.
Earlier you talked about like uncertainty and like self-doubt, especially with like starting a company. So like how did you feel that again when COVID hit, or were you guys pretty confident in the positives that came out of it? Like no, yeah, I figured, but like, you know, with the mail service and you guys saw that pick up, like did that change like your attitude towards it or?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, when it hit, we pretty much like my partners and I, we like powwowed and just were like, all right, here it is. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, there's no time to kind of like, I mean, my biggest stressor isn't like ever like me. Like, I'm pretty basic. Like, if everything like fell apart tomorrow, like I'd be like, all right, well, try something else, you know, do it again. But like when you have like the responsibility of like other people's livelihoods, right? Like that's the stressor of like, that was my stressor in COVID. It wasn't like, what am I gonna do? Right. It was like, how am I gonna make sure everyone gets paychecks? Right. And so fortunately, like we you know, the year before were really smart. And instead of like why when we were like in a surplus, we put money into a surplus account because we're like, hey, we didn't start with any runway. What if we made our own runway just in case? Like, or if we want to like buy a building or make an investment or something, like that would be great. We should do that. Not knowing that like that would become like our burn rate, right? Where it's like if we lose clients and stuff, like at least we have X amount of months covered to figure it out, right? And that's ultimately like what we did. And we were really fortunate that no one got laid off and no one missed a paycheck last year. But that's a decision my partners and I made to like take lower salaries and like put pretty much so much back into the business from the jump instead of being like, let's cash out and have nice cars. Like, you know, like I love light rail. I'll keep taking light rail. Like, you know, it's like the long-term play, right? And so when COVID did hit, there was definitely that like, oh shit, like, man, like all this stuff we were doing, like, what's that gonna mean? You know, like, I mean, we are working on like other events and stuff that we were gonna launch. You know, we had contracts that we were gonna do. We were gonna take the whole team to Us by Night, which is like a design conference in Antwerp, Belgium. And that's not even a thing anymore. Like they lost everything. So they're not even around. Like, so we were really fortunate. And in that time to speak to like mail service, what we decided is, okay, we had this time opened up from like lost client work, right? We could like spend it going and getting shitty clients, or we could be like, let's get really tight and lean right now and not spend extra and focus internally on things that we want to, like we should be building. So when the lights do come back on, you know, in the world, we've spent this last year getting all these things tightened up, right? Contracts, all this other stuff. Mail service was one of those things where, you know, it came about from, you know, we did that collaboration piece with Tynan, right? About like reaching out and like doing the postcard that you send to other people. And that was really fun for us because it was like being able to collaborate with another designer in a time that we're all at home and we're like, and we were like, what can we send out that like makes people feel connected? And like, you know, doing that felt good because we were all feeling like, you know, missing seeing each other and figuring out how to be creative in a, you know, windowed space like this and not being able to be around each other, bouncing ideas and like that energy. And so we, you know, wanted to create something to do that. And that's mail service just kind of continued with like, you know, send something out that's like a positive affirmation, right? Because we all feel that uncertainty. And like I said, it doesn't go away. Like there's so many things. I'll tell you right now, like a personal thing that we're working on is like, I'm doing some stuff for Travis Scott right now. And it's like started out as like kind of like their team being like, oh no, like we don't want any outside input, blah, blah. And then certain middle people got taken out and now like it's directly working with like his designer who's like amazing. Like we're cool now. And now, but like initially I was like, when it like was like, okay, actually Curtis, like you do like, go ahead and do these things. I'm like, oh shit. Like I didn't really like plan on this. Right. And it's like, am I even going to like be able to think of stuff that's like going to be on the level for like this? And then working on it, like his designer like didn't even have Pantones together for shit and like know what Creative Cloud libraries were. I was like, hey, I built out a Travis library for you that we can link so you can just grab these assets. He's like, I don't think I subscribed to that. I was like, you have Illustrator, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, all right. I was like, word, you know what I mean? But like, and then working together and like with his team and stuff like that, like it's been great because, you know, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can do this. Like I feel good. And like other projects we've worked on, you know, similar like level of like that, where you're like, oh shit, like this is like a big project. there's that self-doubt, and then like you start getting into it, you're like, oh no, that's just that shit in my head again, right? Like, you know, there's a reason I'm even in this position. Like, I wouldn't be here having this conversation with this person in this room if like it wasn't supposed to be, right? Like, you don't accidentally fall into the opportunities. Like, you keep getting. One of my favorite sayings is like, there's no such thing as luck. It's luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And so like, you're constantly preparing to be in that opportune moment to then like make that luck happen, right? So just know that like you're gonna constantly have those like self-doubt, you know, feelings, and like every new scenario, whether it's COVID or like a new project or something, like you'll have those initially, but just kind of, you gotta like I know, like I'm in this position, someone hit me up, right? Someone found me, like I said, they don't go like tapping random people on the street, like graphic designer, graphic designer, graphic designer. Like, you have to be putting yourself in these situations, and someone has to select you to like work on whatever they're doing. So, you know, you're in that room for a reason. So just like keep that in mind anytime that pops up. Bye, Sarah.
Any more questions, guys? Well, if they do have questions, and the meeting ends, do you have a way that people can reach out to you? I don't know if that's an avenue you want to open up, but just
It's all good. Yeah, you could email me. Yeah, let me just drop it in chat. I should just I'll send it to me. I just put Rose's email, and she's like, I'm getting all these emails about inquiries about design questions. Group.us. Make sure this is right. Okay, this is my email. Or if like you're on Instagram, you follow me, just DM me. So whatever's easiest. If you have questions, want to bounce stuff over, want to crit, just hit me. Just know, like I probably see it, and like I said at the beginning of the call, Katie, like I will respond. Sometimes it just takes a couple of days to get it, but I intentionally mark things in my inbox a certain way, so like I know, and I have it in my bullet journal, and it carries over to each day. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, first of all, just want to thank you for your time. I think I speak on behalf of everyone that this call was super helpful, especially at a time
Awesome.
of like, you're at for the seniors, you know, you're ending your time at Sac State, and there's all this feeling of insecurity. And I think you definitely helped us think about it from a new perspective. So thank you for that. And then
y'all
ultimately,
good.
just
We're
like
gonna be fine.
an hour and a half of talking. I know it was a long time. Didn't think that it was going to be this long. So thank you for your time. I'll let everyone unmute themselves so that they can also say thank you. And yeah, I guess that's the end of the meeting.
It was only me, but
I was like, should we coordinate? All right, 1, 2.